Once upon a time, in the quiet suburb of Willow Creek, there lived a woman named Margaret Thompson. At 68 years old, Margaret had seen her fair share of life's twists and turns. She had been married for 40 years to her late husband, Harold, a kind-hearted mechanic who had passed away 25 years earlier from a sudden heart attack. Since then, Margaret had raised their only child, Lisa, single-handedly, pouring every ounce of her energy into ensuring her daughter had a better life than she did. Now, in her modest two-story home, with its creaky wooden floors and a backyard garden overflowing with hydrangeas she tended meticulously, Margaret spent her days knitting scarves for neighbors, reading mystery novels from the local library, and occasionally volunteering at the community center. But beneath her gentle exterior simmered a quiet storm of unspoken resentments. It was a crisp autumn afternoon in mid-November when the phone rang, shattering the peace of her afternoon tea. Margaret glanced at the caller ID and saw Lisa's name. She answered with her usual warmth. "Hello, dear. How's everything?" "Mom, I need you to host Thanksgiving this year," Lisa said breezily, as if she were requesting a recipe for apple pie. "It'll be about 18 people from David's side of the family. You know how amazing your cooking is. Nobody does stuffing like you." Margaret froze, her teacup halfway to her lips. The world seemed to tilt slightly as she absorbed the words. 68 years of life, 40 years of marriage, 25 years of widowhood, and now this casual demand. 18 people, Lisa, and why me? Why not at your place? From the other end, Lisa let out an exasperated huff. The kind that reminded Margaret of Lisa's teenage years when she'd throw fits over curfews. "Oh, come on, Mom. You have all that free time since you've retired from the school cafeteria. David and I are swamped with work. He's got that big project at the office, and I'm pulling double shifts at the hospital. Plus, our apartment is tiny. We'd be tripping over each other. Your house is ideal, that huge living room, the wraparound porch, and your kitchen is like a professional setup. And honestly, David's family raves about your mashed potatoes every time." Margaret leaned back in her worn armchair, the one Harold had bought her for their 20th anniversary, its fabric faded from years of use. This was the same kitchen where she'd baked cookies for Lisa's school bake sales, where she'd nursed her through chickenpox and heartbreak, where she'd sobbed alone after Harold's funeral, clutching his favorite coffee mug. It felt like the roles had reversed long ago, with Lisa treating her like a convenient service rather than a parent. "Lisa, sweetheart, I'm not your personal caterer. I'm your mother." "Mom, don't be so dramatic. It's just a family gathering. You can get everything from the store. If you want, I'll reimburse you later. David's sister, Rachel, is bringing pies, so you just handled the turkey, sides, salads, apps, and maybe tidy up the place before and after. The basics, you know, the basics." Margaret felt a sharp pang in her chest, like a knife twisting slowly. When had this become the norm? When had she become the invisible backbone of her daughter's life, expected to serve without question? And what about dietary needs? David's family is picky, aren't they? Lisa laughed lightly, as if it were a minor detail. "Yeah, a bit. Uncle Frank is diabetic, so nothing too sugary. Cousin Emily is vegan now. Grandma Louise likes her veggies overcooked and no shellfish allergies, you remember. Oh, and we'll need beer and wine, but keep it budget-friendly. It adds up with so many people." Each stipulation landed like a pebble in a growing avalanche. It wasn't just Thanksgiving. It was decades of accumulated slights, building into an unbreakable wall. The times Lisa had borrowed money for rent and forgotten to repay it. The weekends Margaret had babysat their dog while they jetted off on spontaneous trips. The holidays where she'd cooked for crowds, only to be left with the cleanup while everyone else lounged. "What will you be doing while I'm slaving away in the kitchen for David's entire clan?" "Oh, I'll help, of course. Maybe chop some veggies, or set the table. David will be mingling with his relatives. You know how these things go. He's the host in spirit." Something inside Margaret snapped, not audibly, but deep within, like a taut string, finally giving way. It wasn't her heart. It was her endless well of tolerance, the one that had sustained her through Harold's illness, Lisa's rebellious phase, and years of quiet loneliness. For 68 years, she'd been the fixer, the giver, the one who never complained. "Lisa, let me ask you something. When was the last time David and his family invited me over for anything? When did they treat me like family instead of free help?" "Mom, don't go there. They love you. It's just, David is introverted. You know, he doesn't do big gestures." Introverted David, who had no issue asking for a $1,500 loan last year to fix his truck, promising repayment that never materialized. David, who used her garage as storage for his old furniture without asking. David, who ate her home-cooked meals with grunts of approval but never a genuine thank you. I see it all clearly now, Lisa. Lisa's voice shifted to that honeyed tone she used when sensing resistance. So, that's a yes. You'll do it. It'll be the best Thanksgiving ever, and everyone will talk about how wonderful you are. Margaret stared out at her garden, the leaves turning gold and red in the fall light. The same garden where she'd planted tulips with Lisa as a toddler, where Harold had built a birdhouse that still stood weathered but proud. Her life had shrunk to this: being useful, being needed, but never truly valued. Lisa, darling, I have some news. David's family is welcome for Thanksgiving, but I'll be on a cruise, so you'll have to manage it yourselves. I'm not a maid or a chef hire. The line went dead silent, save for Lisa's sharp intake of breath. Margaret could picture her daughter's face, flushed eyes wide, the panic of someone unaccustomed to hearing no. What, Mom, you're joking, right? A cruise, alone. Where? This is insane. We've already told everyone it's at your place. You planned it without consulting me, Lisa. Now you can handle it without me. Margaret hung up, her hands steady for the first time in the conversation. A rush of adrenaline coursed through her, terrifying yet exhilarating. She wandered into the den, where shelves lined with photo albums chronicled her life. There was Lisa at age 7, gap-toothed and grinning on her first bite. Harold in his work overalls, beaming after fixing up their old Ford. Family vacations to the lake. Before bills and burdens piled up. When had she lost herself in all this? When had Margaret Thompson become just Mom, the eternal provider? She recalled Harold's death vividly 25 years ago. Lisa only 12, screaming in confusion as the paramedics wheeled him away. Margaret had vowed then to be everything for her daughter: provider, protector, pillar. She took on extra hours at the school cafeteria, her hands raw from scrubbing pots, her back aching from lifting trays. She skipped vacations to fund Lisa's dance lessons and college tuition, selling Harold's tools to cover textbooks. Remarriage? Out of the question. Lisa needed stability, not a stepfather complicating things. When Lisa married David 6 years ago, Margaret dared to hope for respite. Her daughter was 35, independent, a nurse with a steady job, but the requests started small and snowballed. Mom, can we crash at your place for a week while our apartment gets painted? Mom, spot us $500 for the vet bill, we'll pay you back. Mom, host Easter brunch, our kitchen's too cramped. And Margaret always acquiesced, smiling through the exhaustion. In her bedroom, she pulled out the old ledger from her dresser, a habit from her working days, tracking every expense. The figures stared back accusingly. Over $12,000 in the past 6 years funneled to Lisa and David. $700 for their wedding flowers. She gifted $1,200 for David's job interview suit and travel. $900 for Lisa's car tires after a blowout. Groceries for their surprise visits. Birthday gifts for David's nieces and nephews. Even the down payment on their first apartment, $2,500, she'd quietly transferred. Never once had they inquired about her leaking roof, her arthritis meds, or the loneliness that gnawed at her on quiet evenings. Tears came then, hot and furious, not from sorrow but from pent-up anger. Anger at Lisa for her entitlement, at David for his casual exploitation, but mostly at herself for enabling it all. The phone buzzed. Lisa again. Mom, this is crazy. David's flipping out. His parents are flying in from Florida. What do I do? I can't cook for 18 people. Figure it out, Lisa, like adults do. But Mom, you're being unreasonable. Cancel whatever silly trip you're dreaming up. At your age, traveling alone, be realistic. We can compromise all by the turkey. At her age, as if 68 rendered her helpless, stripping her of autonomy. Lisa, I have the money the same I've been giving you. And no, we don't ask for it back in families, right? But helping goes both ways. When did you last check on me? Stammering silence. I call you all the time. You call when you need favors. There's a difference. That night, sleep evaded Margaret. She paced the house, memories flooding like a dam burst. The first slight, 3 years ago at a family barbecue, when David complained her potato salad was too mayo-heavy compared to his mother's, and Lisa giggled instead of defending her. The emergency room visit to Wintersbach, when Margaret slipped on ice and sprained her ankle. Lisa arrived hours later. Post-shopping trip, dismissing it as no big deal. Selling Harold's watch, his prized possession, to cover Lisa's credit card debt after a rough month. The flu that laid Debt after a rough month, the flu that laid her low for days, with no visit from Lisa, but a call the moment she recovered. Mom, can you dog? We're off to Vegas. At 5 a.m., another call. Mom, I haven't slept. David's mad at me now. His aunt already booked her train. Please, let's fix this. I'll help more clean up, whatever. The issue isn't help, Lisa. It's respect. Host at your place or rent a venue. My house isn't a free venue, but that costs money, and my effort doesn't. A pause, heavy with realization. Mom, you're acting selfish. What's gotten into you? Selfish, the weapon wielded against women who dare prioritize themselves. Margaret unplugged the phone, the ensuing quiet a balm to her soul. Morning brought clarity, a lightness she hadn't known since youth. She dressed in her best sundress, the floral one Lisa deemed outdated, and headed downtown. The travel agency beckoned, nestled between the florist and the bookstore. Good morning, greeted the agent, a cheerful man named Tom Reyes. Planning a getaway? Yes, for Thanksgiving, alone, somewhere far and warm. Tom's eyes sparkled. Solo adventures are the best. Beaches, islands, we have packages for independent travelers. Margaret eyed the brochures. Turquoise waters in the Bahamas, palm-fringed shores in Hawaii, vibrant markets in Mexico. For years, these were fantasies, glimpsed in waiting rooms, reserved for others. Budget, around $4,000, she said, thinking of her savings. Untouched now that emergencies weren't hers to fund. Perfect. Let's book you a week in Aruba beachfront resort, all-inclusive, with excursions for one. As she signed the papers, Margaret felt reborn. No more the sacrificial lamb. She was Margaret Thompson, explorer of her own life. Lisa would learn, or not, but that was no longer her burden. Back home, she packed lightly, humming tunes from her youth. The garden bloomed brighter, the house felt larger. Freedom tasted sweet, like the first bite of a long-denied dessert. And as the plane would lift off come Thanksgiving week, Margaret knew she'd finally claimed her holiday and her life for herself. Margaret had always been the pillar of her family, the one who held everything together with quiet strength and endless sacrifice. At 68, she was a retired schoolteacher living in a cozy suburb of Chicago, her days filled with gardening, reading historical novels, and tending to the needs of others. Her husband Thomas had passed away 10 years ago from a sudden heart attack, leaving her to navigate the world alone. But she wasn't truly alone. There was her daughter Lisa, now 35, married to Jason, a man who seemed perpetually between jobs and full of grand ideas that never quite panned out. It started with a phone call on a crisp November afternoon. Margaret was sipping her afternoon tea, flipping through a travel magazine she'd picked up on a whim at the grocery store, when her phone rang. It was Lisa, her voice laced with that familiar mix of urgency and expectation. Mom, I need a huge favor, Lisa said without preamble. Jason's family is coming for Christmas. His parents, siblings, their kids, the whole crew. That's like 18 people. We can't host at our place. It's too small. Can we do it at yours? You'll handle the cooking, right? You're the best at that turkey and all the sides. Margaret felt the familiar weight settle on her shoulders. Christmas at her house meant days of preparation, shopping for groceries, decorating, baking pies from scratch, and cleaning up after everyone. Last year, she'd spent the entire holiday in the kitchen, while the others laughed and exchanged gifts in the living room. At her age, the exhaustion lingered for weeks. Lisa, honey, I'm not sure. I've been thinking about taking it easy this year. There was a pause, then Lisa's tone shifted to pleading. Come on, Mom. Jason's mom is so picky, and you know how to make everyone happy. Please, for me. Margaret sighed. How could she say no? She was a mother. That's what mothers did. All right, fine. But this is the last time. The conversation ended, but the unease didn't. That evening, as she washed dishes from her solitary dinner, Margaret glanced at the travel magazine again. Glossy photos of sun-drenched European cities stared back at her. Cobblestone streets in Madrid, the vibrant mosaics of Barcelona, ancient ruins in Rome, the artistic splendor of Florence. A small ad caught her eye. Grand tours of Spain and Italy. 21 days of discovery. Visit Madrid, Barcelona, Rome, Florence, and more. Historic hotels, gourmet meals included, English-speaking guides, perfect for solo travelers seeking renewal. Renewal, the word hit her like a gentle wave. When had she last done something purely for herself? Not since Thomas died, and even before that, her life had revolved around family. She bookmarked the page and went to bed, but sleep evaded her. By morning, the idea had taken root. The next day, Margaret drove to a local travel agency, her heart pounding with a mix of nerves and excitement. The agent, Sophia, a cheerful woman in her 40s with a warm smile, greeted her enthusiastically. "What can I help you with today?" Sophia asked, but Margaret hesitated, then pointed to the ad she'd torn out. "This tour, tell me more about it." Sophia lit up. "Oh, it's incredible. 3 weeks exploring the best of Spain and Italy. You'll stay in historic hotels like a converted palace in Madrid and a Renaissance villa in Florence. All meals are included, from paella in Barcelona to pasta in Rome. Our guides are fluent in English and passionate about history. It's ideal for someone looking to rediscover themselves." Rediscover herself. The phrase echoed in Margaret's mind, stirring something deep within. How long had it been since she'd felt truly alive, not just existing for others? "I'm interested," Margaret said, surprising herself. "When does it depart?" "We have a spot opening on December 18th, return on January 8th, right over the holidays. Perfect for a fresh start." The dates aligned perfectly with Christmas, the very time Lisa expected her to slave away in the kitchen for Jason's extended family. The irony made Margaret chuckle inwardly. "Do I need to think about it?" Sophia smiled. "Only if you want to, but spots fill up fast." "No," Margaret replied, her voice steady. "I'll book it now." As Sophia pulled up the paperwork, Margaret felt a rush of terror, mixed with exhilaration. This was impulsive, unlike her usual cautious self. But it felt right, like reclaiming a piece of her soul she'd long neglected. Sophia asked for her passport and a credit card for the deposit. Margaret pulled out her passport, renewed 2 years ago, on a whim. Lisa had laughed when she saw it. "Mom, why bother? You're not going anywhere exotic." "Oh, but I am," Margaret thought with a secret smile. "To Spain and Italy." Leaving the agency with her itinerary in hand, Margaret felt transformed. It wasn't just the trip. It was the act of choosing herself. Her phone buzzed a text from Lisa. "Mom, Jason says, if you back out on hosting, he'll tell his whole family you're flaking and ruining the holidays. You wouldn't do that, right?" Margaret read it twice, first with the old guilt, then with newfound resolve. Jason, who bounced from job to job, never lasting more than a few months. Jason, who'd crashed at her house rent-free for 4 months last year after a misunderstanding at his old workplace. Jason, who devoured her home-cooked meals without a thank you, and now dared call her selfish. She typed back, "Tell Jason, he can say whatever he likes. I'll be in Europe, out of earshot." The response was instant. "Europe, Mom, have you lost it? With whose money?" "My money," Margaret replied. Then, after a beat, "The same I've poured into you and Jason for years." Her phone rang immediately. "Lisa." Margaret stared at the screen, then silenced it. For the first time, she chose peace over placating. She had packing to do, whether to research for winter in Europe. At 68, it was time to live the life she'd deferred. Walking to a nearby department store, Margaret felt unburdened, as if shedding decades of invisible chains. For once, her future held excitement unrelated to others' joy. Over the next 4 days, Margaret kept her phone off, reveling in the novelty of solitude. No demands, no justifications. She treated preparations like an adventure. She splurged on a sleek navy suitcase, sturdy yet stylish. In the boutique, she tried on outfits she'd never considered, a tailored wool coat in soft gray, vibrant silk scarves in jewel tones, sensible yet elegant walking boots for ancient streets. At the bookstore, she purchased detailed guides to Spain and Italy, poring over them with a highlighter. The Prado Museum in Madrid, home to masterpieces by Velázquez and Goya she'd studied in college but never seen. The Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, Gaudi's whimsical basilica that defied gravity. The Colosseum in Rome, echoing with gladiatorial history. And in Florence, the Uffizi Gallery, where she'd stand before Botticelli's Birth of Venus, feeling the weight of centuries. This was her plan centered on her curiosity, her dreams. On the 5th day, curiosity won. She powered on her phone. 62 missed calls from Lisa, 18 voicemails, 34 texts. She scrolled through them calmly. "Mom, pick up. This is insane. You're being childish. Jason's family has tickets booked. You can't bail. I'm so disappointed. Never thought you'd be this self-centered. Mom, we need you. Please." The cycle was clear. Rage, guilt-tripping, playing victim. It had manipulated her for years, but no longer. She called her old friend Clara Thompson, a no-nonsense widow of 70 who'd always cut through the nonsense. "Margaret, thank goodness. Lisa rang me frantic, wondering if you'd vanished." "Clara, I need your straight talk. Meet me at our spot. They convened at the neighborhood diner, their weekly haunt for 15 years. Clara, with her silver bob and sharp eyes, had embraced widowhood differently. She'd taken up yoga, joined a book club, volunteered at an art museum, and even dated a charming professor briefly. You glow, Clara said first, like you've woken up. Margaret spilled it all. Lisa's demand, her refusal, the booked tour. Clara listened intently, sipping coffee. So, am I selfish? Margaret asked. Clara burst into laughter, rich and freeing. Darling, I've waited ages for you to ask that. I've watched Lisa walk all over you, and you've let her. Every time I pointed it out, you'd defend. She's my girl. Tough times, mother's duty. Ring a bell. Margaret blushed. Yes, those excuses had shielded the truth. Am I a terrible mom for ditching Christmas? You're finally distinguishing good parenting from enabling. Good moms foster independence, accountability, appreciation. Enablers handle everything. Breeding helplessness. Clara's insights soaked in. Margaret had enabled Lisa, fixing every mess until Lisa expected it. Her love had stunted her daughter's growth. But mothers should always be there, right? Lisa's 35, married, with a home. If she can't host dinner without you orchestrating, that's on her and you for not teaching. After Thomas died, you babied her at 25. Fine then, but you continued at 30, 35. Now she sees you as her fixer. Margaret pondered, the realization bittersweet. In shielding Lisa, she'd weakened her. What if she cuts me off? Then you'll know if it's love or utility. The stark truth. Margaret had equated neediness with affection. Real love wasn't transactional. The tragedy, Lisa doesn't know the real you, the dreamer, the history buff, just the problem solver, the bank. Tears welled, not sorrow, but release. Seen at last. Go to Europe, Clara urged, squeezing her hand. Rediscover Margaret, unbound by mum duties. The following morning, resolve hardened. Margaret couldn't depart amid tension. Boundaries needed voicing. She called Lisa. Mom, where were you? I was terrified. Jason thinks you've had a breakdown that explains the weirdness. Again, faux worry, masking insult. Jason, ever the armchair psychologist. Again, faux worry, masking insult. Jason, ever the armchair psychologist, ignoring his own flaws. Lisa, come over. We must talk. About scrapping that silly trip. No, face to face. Lisa arrived an hour later, flustered. Jason in tow, uninvited. They sat in the living room, tension thick. Mom, what's this about? Lisa demanded. Margaret drew a breath. The Christmas hosting I won't. I've booked a trip to Europe. It's time I did something for me. Jason snorted. Europe, at your age? That's reckless. And selfish. My family's counting on this. Your family can host themselves, Margaret said evenly. Lisa, you're capable. Plan it at your place or elsewhere. But I'm done being the default solution. Lisa's eyes widened. But Mom, you always do this. It's tradition. We need you. No, you want convenience. For years, I've paid bills, housed you, cooked endlessly. Jason lived here free for months. I've given, but it's drained me. I deserve joy too. Jason interjected. This is about money. Fine, we'll pay something later. Margaret shook her head. Not money, respect, boundaries. I'm 68, not your servant. Lisa teared up. You're abandoning us. Over Christmas, I'm choosing myself, like you chose Jason, your life. Support that, or not, but the trip happens. Silence stretched. Jason muttered about ungrateful elders, but Lisa hushed him, conflicted. I don't know what to say, Lisa admitted. Say you'll try understanding, or goodbye. Either way, I board that plane. They left unsettled, but Margaret felt empowered. The confrontation, though hard, was liberating. On the weeks leading to departure, Margaret immersed in preparations. She attended a travel seminar, learned basic Spanish and Italian phrases, packed thoughtfully. Friends like Clara cheered her on. Even neighbors shared tips. Lisa called sporadically, tones shifting from anger to tentative reconciliation. Mom, maybe we overreacted, but Christmas without you. You'll manage. And I'll send postcards. On December 18th, at the airport, Margaret's heart raced. Boarding the flight, she glanced back at her old life, then forward to adventure. In Madrid's bustling streets, under twinkling holiday lights, she tasted freedom. Barcelona's architecture inspired awe. Rome's history humbled her. Florence's art reignited passion. By journey's end, Margaret returned changed, stronger, vibrant. Lisa, having hosted Christmas solo albeit chaotically, greeted her with wary respect. "Mom, you look happy." "I am. And you survived." Their relationship evolved, slowly, less dependency, more equality. Margaret taught Lisa recipes over coffee, not obligation. Jason found steady work, perhaps spurred by necessity. Years later, Margaret reflected, that trip was an escape, but awakening. At 68, she'd rediscovered herself, proving it's never too late to rewrite your story. A mother's awakening, in the quiet suburb of Willow Creek, where maple trees lined the streets and the air carried the faint scent of pine year-round, lived Margaret Hayes. At 65, Margaret was a retired schoolteacher with a modest pension, a cozy two-story home filled with books and faded photographs, and a heart that had always been too generous for her own good. For the past 6 years, ever since her daughter Lisa married into the affluent Thompson family, Margaret had become the unspoken backbone of every family event. Christmas dinners, Thanksgiving feasts, birthday barbecues, she hosted them all, cooking elaborate meals, decorating her home with twinkling lights and handmade wreaths, and footing the bill for groceries that could feed an army. It started innocently enough, with Lisa suggesting, "Mom, your roast is the best. Why not have everyone over here?" But over time, it evolved into an expectation, a tradition built on Margaret's silent sacrifices. This year, however, something shifted. As the leaves turned golden and the first chill of autumn settled in, Margaret booked a solo cruise to the Caribbean, a dream she'd harbored since her husband passed away a decade ago. No more slaving over a hot stove for ungrateful relatives. No more cleaning up after a house full of people who barely noticed her efforts. When Lisa called to confirm the usual Christmas plans, Margaret dropped the bombshell. "I'm not hosting this year. I'm going on a trip." The fallout was immediate. Lisa's texts flooded in, a mix of shock and pleading. "Mom, you can't do this. The Thompsons are counting on it. Everyone's already planning to fly in." Margaret held firm, suggesting they handle the dinner themselves, like responsible adults. But Lisa insisted on a face-to-face talk. "Come over at 3 p.m. tomorrow," Margaret replied. "And come alone." "Alone?" Lisa echoed in her next message, confusion laced with suspicion. "Why alone?" "Because," Margaret thought bitterly, "your husband David wants to explain the reality to me the same. David, who crashed on my couch for 4 months after losing his job, rent-free, eating my food and leaving his laundry for me to wash. Now he wanted to lecture her on reality." No, this conversation was between mother and daughter. The next afternoon, Lisa arrived with a storm cloud over her head, her face twisted in the petulant scowl of a scolded child. She marched into the living room, plopping down on the floral armchair with her legs crossed tightly, arms folded like a shield. "Mom, this nonsense has to end," she snapped, her voice sharp as a winter wind. "You're behaving like a stubborn kid. The entire family is gossiping about you." "What family, Lisa?" Margaret asked calmly, sipping her chamomile tea from a chipped mug she'd had since Lisa's childhood. "David's family, you mean? The ones who've never once extended an invitation to me. The Thompsons who only see me as the free caterer for their endless parties." "That's ridiculous," Lisa retorted, though her eyes darted away. "They love you. They appreciate everything you do." Margaret set her mug down with a deliberate clink. "When was the last time any of them checked in on me, asked how I was feeling after my knee surgery last spring, brought a simple bouquet or invited me out for coffee, or even just called to say hello, without wanting something?" Lisa's mouth opened, ready with a defense, but no words came. The room grew heavy with unspoken truth. They both knew, never, not once in 6 years had the Thompsons shown genuine interest in Margaret beyond her utility. "Lisa," Margaret continued, her voice steady but laced with years of pent-up hurt, "for 6 years, I've been the unpaid servant to your husband's family, and you've let it happen. Encouraged it, even. That's not fair." Lisa protested, her cheeks flushing. "We've always treated you with what, exactly?" Margaret interrupted, rising from her seat. She walked to the antique desk in the corner, pulling out a worn leather-bound ledger she'd kept meticulously. Flipping to a dog-eared page, she laid it open on the coffee table between them. There, in neat columns, were the tallies: groceries, wine, decorations, even the extra utilities from hosting crowds. The grand total stared up at them, $18,500. Lisa's eyes widened, scanning the figures as if they were hieroglyphs. "Mom, we never told you to track all this. This is insane." "You're absolutely right," Margaret agreed, her tone unflinching. "You never asked me to track it, and you never asked if it was okay to use my money in the first place." You just assumed because I'm mom, because I'm family, that my resources were yours for the taking, from my pension, my savings, the nest egg I built after your father died. Money I should be using for my own future, not subsidizing your in-laws' holidays. But family helps family, Lisa whispered, her voice cracking slightly, falling back on the age-old mantra. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes locking onto her daughter's. Then tell me, Lisa, how have you helped me in these 6 years? What have you given back? The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of a neighbor's lawnmower. Lisa fidgeted, twisting her wedding ring. I'm always there for you when you need me. When have I needed you? Margaret pressed gently but firmly. Give me one example, just one. More silence. Lisa's mind raced through memories: birthdays where Margaret baked cakes, weekends where she babysat their dog, emergencies where she dropped everything to help, but the reverse, blank. When you had that bad cold 2 winters ago, she finally stammered. Margaret shook her head, a sad smile tugging at her lips. You mean the pneumonia that landed me in the hospital for 3 days? You didn't visit once. I later heard from a mutual friend that you were off skiing with David's cousins in Aspen. Lisa's face burned crimson, shame mixing with defensiveness. I didn't realize it was that serious. You said it was just a cough. I called you twice, left voicemails saying I could barely breathe. You texted back a thumbs-up emoji, and nothing else. Margaret paused, letting the weight settle. Mom, you can't pick apart every tiny oversight like this. They're not tiny, Lisa. They're a lifetime of them. 32 years since you were born of me, giving everything, my time, my energy, my love, and you taking it all, without a thought to reciprocity. The moment I draw a line, suddenly I'm the villain. Tears welled in Lisa's eyes, spilling over in dramatic sobs, but Margaret recognized them, not the raw tears of remorse, but the calculated ones that had melted her resolve countless times before, from toddler tantrums to teenage rebellions. Mom, please, Lisa choked out. You can't bail on Christmas. You can't dump this mess on me. You made this mess, Margaret replied evenly. You promised the Thompsons I'd host without even consulting me. Assumed my home, my kitchen, my wallet were yours to command. This is your puzzle to solve now. But I don't know how, Lisa wailed, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I've never cooked for 20 people. The turkey, the sides, the pies, it's overwhelming. Then learn, Margaret suggested. Watch tutorials online. Hire a caterer. Order from that fancy deli downtown. Rent a venue. There are endless options that don't rope me in. All that costs a fortune, Lisa complained, her voice turning whiny. And my labor is free? Is that it? Margaret shot back, her patience thinning. 6 years of shopping, prepping, cooking, serving, cleaning dust that have no value. Lisa sniffled, shifting strategies like a chess player down to her last pieces. If you do this, David will be furious with me. He says if his family feels snubbed, it'll be on my head. They'll blame me for ruining the tradition. Then perhaps it's time David steps up and handles his own kin, Margaret said, her voice rising slightly for the first time. He's a 38-year-old executive. For heaven's sake, when will he grow up? He's never planned a single event because women have always done it for him. First his mother, Vivian, now me. Enough is enough. You have no right to badmouth my husband. Lisa exploded, jumping to her feet, her face contorted in rage. I have every right, Margaret countered, standing as well, though her posture remained composed. I've watched him lounge on my couch, belch after meals I prepared, and nap while I scrubbed pots. All while you enabled it. Lisa's eyes narrowed, lashing out in desperation. I get it now. You're jealous. Jealous that I have a life beyond you, a family with David. You can't stand sharing me. The accusation was so outlandish that Margaret let out a genuine chuckle, though it held no joy. Jealous of David? Hardly. I'm exhausted from being his on-urine-paid maid. Go ahead, take your stupid cruise comment back. Wait, you didn't say it yet, but I see it in your eyes. Go on your trip, Mom. We'll manage without you, but don't come crawling back when you're lonely. With that, Lisa stormed out, the front door slamming with such force that a framed photo on the wall tilted askew. Margaret straightened it, then stood in the hallway, inhaling deeply. For the first time, in over 3 decades, she'd voiced her truths unfiltered, and the sky hadn't fallen. The ensuing weeks brought an unexpected serenity. Margaret had braced for guilt's familiar know the what-ifs, the second-guessing the maternal instinct to smooth things over. But it never arrived. Instead, A profound peace enveloped her. Mornings began with leisurely coffee on the porch, watching squirrels scamper across the lawn. She dusted off her old watercolor set, painting landscapes she'd only dreamed of. Afternoons were for long strolls through the botanical gardens, where she marveled at blooming orchids and listened to birdsong she'd long ignored amid family chaos. Evenings, she curled up with novels, losing herself in stories of empowered women reclaiming their lives. One crisp November day, as Margaret packed her suitcase with sundresses and sun hats, the doorbell chimed. Her heart skipped, anticipating Lisa's return, maybe with apologies, maybe with more pleas. But opening the door revealed Vivian Thompson, David's 70-year-old mother. Vivian was a poised widow, always impeccably dressed in tailored suits, her silver hair in a flawless bob. Their interactions had been polite but superficial, never delving beyond small talk at gatherings. "Margaret, I apologize for dropping by unannounced," Vivian said, her tone formal as a business meeting. "But we must discuss this." "Of course, Vivian, please, come in." Margaret led her to the sunlit parlor, offering tea which Vivian declined with a wave. Vivian perched on the edge of the loveseat, back ramrod straight, as if steeling herself for confrontation. "Lisa informed me of your decision. This cruise over Christmas. The timing is most inconvenient. Flights are booked, schedules set. The family is in disarray." Margaret met her gaze evenly. "I'm heading to the Bahamas and Jamaica, places I've longed to see since I was young. Postponing my dreams again isn't an option." "I respect your desire for adventure," Vivian conceded, though her lips pursed. "But surely you see how this disrupts everything. We've come to rely on your hospitality." Margaret tilted her head, choosing her words carefully. "Vivian, may I ask, in these 6 years, how often has your family reciprocated, invited me as a guest to your home, or out to dinner, where I wasn't expected to lift a finger?" Vivian blinked, caught off guard, her manicured hands folding in her lap. "Well, we've always been grateful for your generosity in opening your doors." "That's not the question," Margaret pressed. "How many times have I been the honored guest, not the host?" The pause lingered, thick as fog. Vivian glanced at the floor, discomfort etching her features. "We assumed you thrived on it. Your meals are legendary, your home so inviting." "For 6 years," Margaret elaborated, her voice gaining strength, "I've orchestrated every holiday, every milestone, thousands spent on prime cuts, fine wines, festive trimmings, hours prepping, cooking, tidying, mountains of dishes washed while others relaxed. And in all that time, has anyone from your side offered a heartfelt thank you? Or even noticed when I was weary?" Vivian shifted uneasily. "We always. Last Thanksgiving, my brother Harold griped about the stuffing being too salty. My niece Jenna left her kids' mess for you to clean. David, well, he dozed off post-meal, as usual. I see now how that must have felt." "Exactly," Margaret said softly. "You viewed me as a fixture, reliable machine churning out comfort, not a woman with her own aches, aspirations." Vivian met her eyes, surprise flickering. "Tell me, do you know my birthday? My favorite book? The fact I volunteer at the animal shelter? Or that I dream of writing a memoir?" Vivian's expression softened, realization dawning. "I know, I don't. We've never asked. Because to you, I'm not Margaret Hayes. I'm the function that makes gatherings seamless." Vivian sat quietly, absorbing the words. When she spoke, her voice was subdued, almost fragile. "How do we mend this?" "You can't," Margaret replied honestly. 6 years of oversight can't be erased overnight. And truthfully, I no longer seek mending. Host Christmas elsewhere at a bistro, your estate, Lisa's condo. Learn to adapt without me. Isn't this drastic? "Severing ties?" Vivian asked, rising slowly. "Not severing. I'm done being the Thompsons' invisible laborer." At the door, Vivian paused, turning with a vulnerability Margaret had never seen. "One personal question. Were you ever truly joyful in all this?" The query pierced deep, stirring memories of exhaustion masked as duty. "No," Margaret admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I was so consumed with being indispensable that happiness slipped away." Vivian nodded, eyes misty. "Then reclaim it on your cruise. You deserve that." As the door closed, Margaret returned to her packing, a lightness in her step. For the first time in years, she felt seen not as a provider, but as herself. The cruise awaited, promising sun-soaked days and the sweet taste of freedom, and whatever came after, she'd face it on her terms. A new chapter, the dawn of change. For 30 years, Clara Bennett had been the cornerstone of her family, the one who mended every crack and soothed every storm. At 68, she stood in her modest kitchen, staring at a calendar marked with a red circle around a date 5 days away, her flight to Paris. It was more than a trip. It was her declaration of independence, a chance to reclaim the woman she had buried beneath decades of obligations. The phone rang, breaking her reverie. It was her friend Lena. Her voice warmed through the line. "Clara, how's everything?" Clara smiled, a quiet strength in her voice. "I'm learning the difference between being needed and being valued. Lena, it feels like I'm finally breathing." Lena's laughter crackled through the phone, a sound that mirrored Clara's newfound lightness. "That's freedom, my friend." The day before her flight, Clara woke with a flutter of excitement, a sensation she hadn't felt since her youth, when summer vacations held endless possibilities. Her suitcases stood neatly packed, her travel documents tucked into a leather folder, and her wardrobe, carefully chosen for Paris's cobblestone streets and Florence's sunlit piazzas, reflected a woman rediscovering her spark. She chose a sapphire blue dress, one her daughter, Rachel, had once called too bold. Clara wore it defiantly, applying lipstick not to mask her age but to celebrate it. Each wrinkle, she thought, was a chapter of her story, and she was ready to write a new one. As she sipped her morning tea, the doorbell chimed. Her heart leaped, half expecting Rachel, hoping for a reconciliation after months of tension. Instead, she opened the door to find an older gentleman, impeccably dressed, holding a small bouquet of lavender. "Mrs. Clara Bennett?" he asked, his voice smooth and kind. "Yes, that's me," Clara replied, puzzled. "I'm Henry Sullivan, father of your travel agent, Margaret. She told me about your solo journey to Europe. I'm taking a similar trip, same dates, nearly the same itinerary." His eyes twinkled behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I wondered if you'd like some company, not romance, mind you. Just someone to share a coffee in Paris or snap a photo by the Colosseum." Clara's cheeks warmed, caught off guard by the proposal. For months, she'd envisioned this trip as her solitary rebirth, a chance to revel in her own company. Yet here was Henry, offering something unexpected, companionship without strings. I wasn't expecting this," she admitted, studying him. He was in his early 70s, with silver hair swept neatly back, a tweed jacket, and a demeanor that spoke of quiet confidence. "Why are you traveling alone, Henry?" His smile softened, tinged with sorrow. "My wife, Ellen, passed 3 years ago, heart disease. I promised her I'd see the world we always talked about, live for both of us. This is my first big step without her." His words struck a chord in Clara. They were both shedding old skins, seeking versions of themselves long buried under duty. "What do you hope to find in Europe?" she asked, her curiosity genuine. Henry's eyes lit up. "I want to rediscover the man I was before I was just Ellen's caretaker, the one who loved sketching architecture, who laughed without worrying about tomorrow. And you—" Clara paused, her heart echoing his words. "I want to be Clara again, not just Rachel's mother or the family fixer. I want to remember what it's like to dream for myself." Henry nodded, understanding in his silence. "No pressure, Clara, just the chance to share a meal, maybe laugh at my terrible French. What do you say?" She laughed, a sound that felt foreign yet freeing. "On one condition, we split everything. No chivalry nonsense. I've got my own money, and I intend to use it." "Deal," Henry said, handing her the lavender. "Here's my card. I'll be at the Hotel Lumière in Paris. Call if you change your mind." He left with a wave, leaving Clara holding the flowers, her heart racing with a youthful thrill, not for romance, but for the simple joy of being seen as more than a role. That evening, the phone rang again. It was Rachel. "Mom, your flight's tomorrow, right?" Her voice was tentative, heavy with unspoken apologies. "Yes, tomorrow," Clara said, her tone steady. "Mom, I don't want you to go feeling upset with me." "I'm not upset, Rachel. I'm just choosing myself this time." A long pause followed. "Can we talk when you get back?" "When you're ready to listen, we'll talk," Clara replied gently. "I love you, Rachel, but love doesn't mean I'm always at your beck and call." After hanging up, Clara prepared a simple dinner: roasted vegetables and a glass of wine. She savored each bite, imagining tomorrow's Parisian croissant. For the first time in decades, her future felt like a canvas waiting for her brushstrokes. A European awakening. 3 weeks later, Clara sat at a cafe in Florence, a cappuccino warming her hands as the Arno River glittered under the late afternoon sun. She wrote in a leather-bound journal she'd bought in Paris, her handwriting bold and deliberate. Day 20 in Europe, she penned, "Happiness isn't a reward for sacrifice. It's a choice, a daily act of courage." Henry approached, balancing two gelatos, pistachio for her, hazelnut for him. Their friendship had blossomed effortlessly over the weeks. They'd wandered the Louvre together, gotten lost in Venice's labyrinthine alleys, and laughed until their sides ached when Henry mispronounced Pomodoro as Pompadora at a Roman trip. He was a companion who respected her space, shared her curiosity, and never assumed she needed saving. "Writing your masterpiece," Henry teased, settling beside her. "Writing my new beginning," Clara corrected, her eyes bright. "The one that starts at 68. Her phone had buzzed throughout the trip, messages from Rachel, some pleading, others sharp with frustration. At first, Clara read each one, guilt gnawing at her. But as the days passed, she saw them for what they were: Rachel's struggle to navigate a world where her mother was no longer her safety net. The latest message, received yesterday, was different. "Mom, we canceled the family barbecue. Tom and I fought over who'd do the planning. I think I'm starting to get why you needed this trip. I hope you're happy." Clara had read it twice, feeling no victory, only quiet affirmation. Rachel was learning that her problems weren't Clara's to solve. "What's on your mind?" Henry asked, noticing her pensive expression. "I spent my life believing my value came from being useful," Clara said. "I thought love was earned by fixing everyone else's messes. Now I know love doesn't work that way. It's given freely or it's not love at all." Henry nodded, his own story mirroring hers. He'd shared how caring for Ellen had consumed him, how he'd lost his love for sketching in the blur of hospital visits and medications. Clara had told him about the years spent managing Rachel's crises, from financial woes to marital spats, until she'd become invisible even to herself. "You know what I don't miss?" Clara said, her voice light. "Cooking for everyone else. I thought I'd feel empty without it, but I don't." "What do you miss?" Henry asked. "The woman who danced to jazz records, who wanted to write poetry. She's still in there, and she's waking up." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over Florence, Clara felt a profound peace. Tomorrow, she'd return home, but home no longer felt like a cage. It was a place to continue her transformation. "Henry, can I tell you something?" she asked. "Of course. When I was young, I dreamed of being a poet. I never pursued it, life got in the way. But now, at 68, I think I might start." Henry grinned. "I've got a confession, too. I always wanted to learn guitar. Ellen said we were too old for new hobbies, but I'm thinking of buying one." They laughed, the sound carrying over the river. Two people, late in life, discovering that age was no barrier to new beginnings. A new home. 6 months after her return, Clara sat in her newly converted study, a space now filled with notebooks and pens, her first poetry collection taking shape. At 69, she was attending a local writing workshop, her words surprising her with their depth and clarity. Her home had transformed into a sanctuary, every corner reflecting her choices: a vase of fresh lilies, a jazz record spinning softly, a bookshelf brimming with poetry. Rachel and Clara's relationship had evolved. The early months were rocky, filled with tense silences and accusations, but Clara's unwavering boundaries forced a shift. Rachel began asking about Clara's writing, inviting her to coffee without expecting her to foot the bill. Small steps, but they mattered. Tom, Rachel's husband, remained a work in progress, but Clara no longer felt responsible for his shortcomings. Henry became a weekly fixture, their friendship a steady anchor. They'd sip chamomile tea, critique each other's work or poems, his guitar chords, and occasionally catch a matinee at the local theater. Romance wasn't on the table, and that was fine. The beauty lay in their mutual respect, their shared joy in rediscovery. Clara's savings had grown, no longer drained by family demands. She'd splurged on a writing desk, a monthly book club subscription, and a framed print of a Parisian street. Her neighbors noticed the change, greeting her with warmth, asking about her poems. The local cafe owner saved her favorite table, and the librarian recommended new poets. Clara had become visible not just to others, but to herself. Some days, she mourned the years spent believing her worth lay in service, but the sadness no longer lingered. It was a teacher, not a chain. Her hands, once calloused from endless chores, now held pens and crafted verses. The woman who'd boarded that plane to Paris was a shadow of duty. The woman who returned was Clara Bennett, poet, traveler, friend. Each morning brought uncertainty, but it was no longer a burden, it was a gift. Clara had. Each morning brought uncertainty, But it was no longer a burden, it was a gift. Clara had learned that freedom wasn't about doing whatever she wanted, but about refusing what she didn't. As she wrote in her journal, "I am not my sacrifices, I am my choices. And at 69, I choose me."